Hello everybody, Adam Monk here again from FourFourTwo, back with another Friday show. And yeah, well, what did I say last week? I said Chelsea could beat Manchester City. They could have done, they probably should have done, but thanks to 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏, they didn't. Yeah, from one Jackson to another. Mr. Michael Jackson, who you may be familiar with, once wrote a song about 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 called Bad. And these are the lyrics here. It says, just wait till I get through. Presumably that means through on goal, because I'm bad, Shimon! Bad, really, really bad. You know I'm bad, bad. You know it, really, really bad. You know I'm bad, bad. Shimon! You know, really, really bad. What the hell was that, honestly? Anyway, yes, let's turn our attention to the North London derby this weekend. It's a big one, a lot at stake, and in a derby, form goes out the window. And my head goes out the window if Arsenal win. Now, it's a really tricky one to call this in terms of how the game's gonna play out. If you look at this graph here, you can see these are the Premier League shots faced in 2024 so far, and at the bottom there are Arsenal, which is completely expected. Of course, they've been the best defensive side in the league this season. Then there's City, but level with City, there you can see, is Tottenham Hotspur. So this will tell you that both teams are defensively good, and in Spurs' case, particularly after 𝗕𝗫𝗏𝗏 has rejoined the team, of course, after doing his hamstring injury. Apart from when 𝗕𝗫𝗓𝗍𝗧𝗏 made him look like Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith when Mace Windu had him beat. So you're asking, with both teams being defensively good, Adam, surely it'll just be a 0-0 like Man City Arsenal was? Well, no. Well, probably not. The Premier League don't actually give me the scripts. But given the context of it being a derby and the fact that Spurs are pushing for top 4 and Arsenal for the title, you feel that something has to give, particularly in a game with, you know, so few games left in the season. It really is basically or bust now for both sides. Now, fortunately for Tottenham, another team from Birmingham provided a little bit of a blueprint as to how to score against Arsenal and also consequently beat them the other week, and that team was Aston Villa. Unfortunately for Tottenham, they have runners in their own team themselves, namely 𝗕𝗫𝗏𝗏, Brennan Johnson, and of course 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏, who's been doing it for years and he has a conversion rate to go with it as well. So Spurs can imitate this in a similar fashion to how Aston Villa did. Well, then there is one problem, and I've kind of thought about it when thinking about this video and how this game's going to pan out. There is one problem that kind of negates this, and that's the performance that Arsenal put in at Manchester City. Now, I know Manchester City are better and a bigger threat to Arsenal than Tottenham perhaps are, but in a derby game with such high stakes, Arsenal might, and they do have good reason to be very cautious, somewhat cautious certainly in a game like this. In this game, you'll of course remember Arsenal had 6 shots with 27% of possession and were very much camped in their own half, particularly throughout the duration of the second half. And of course as well, Arsenal were using David Raya an awful lot to go long in this game, and there's only been one more game this season where David Raya had a higher percentage of long balls to short balls in the Premier League, and that was at the 1-1 draw at Liverpool. So, you know, it's a similar kind of fixture. It's a big club, it's a derby. You'd suspect Arsenal are going to play a similar way, which might not allow the space for these runners, Son, Werner, Johnson, to actually get in behind. So then what do you do? Well, fortunately for Spurs, they've got Mr. James Maddison, who's an archetypal number 10, loves playing on the edge of the D in those pockets. He can hit a shot from range and create on a whim as well. So against deep blocks, James Maddison is a pretty good and pretty proficient player to have at your disposal. And here you can see he's actually in the top 1% in the top 5 leagues in Europe for shots creating actions with 6.81 per 90, which is absolutely, that is obscene to be quite honest with you. And actually, my mistake, I've actually just expanded the stat and he's actually top out of all the players in the top 5 leagues in Europe for shot creating actions per 90. And the description of a shot creating action is the 2 offensive actions directly leading to a shot, such as a pass, a take on, or drawing a foul. And these are 3 things that James Maddison can do in this sort of pocket against teams that are sitting deep, whether it is drawing a foul or finding that deft pass, or just having a shot himself from range. We know he's very, very good at that as well. So the point I'm trying to make is, however Arsenal set up in this game, whether they are really deep like they were at the Etihad, or whether they're a bit more expansive like they were against Aston Villa, they've kind of got the best of both worlds, because Tottenham have those runners in Son, Johnson and Werner, but then they've also got James Maddison who can pull the strings and maybe find those long balls and those out balls if need be. But also, if Arsenal are sort of penned back and Spurs are on the ascendancy at home but Arsenal are sitting very deep, then Maddison might be the key to unlock it. My only worry, and don't get me wrong, I really do rate Ange Postecoglou, but he's a very, very principled manager and he plays his way, and that is his way. Very much like Pep Guardiola, he's almost stubborn in a good way, in the sense that he doesn't change and he believes in his principles principles and sticks to them. And his principles are to always have a go. Have a go, mate. That's what he always says. But it is to have a go. So, you know, for instance, I think I mentioned this in the interview that you're going to see in a minute to Sonny, who I'll introduce in a second. But, you know, when Chelsea played against Tottenham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and they went down to 9 men, Postecoglou didn't really adapt even with 9 men, and he still had all of his defenders banked on the halfway line because he wanted to win the game that much. So he's not exactly a pragmatic manager, but he's a very principled one. So I do think he's going to throw the kitchen sink at Arsenal, so to speak, at certain points in this game, and that's something that I think Arsenal are meticulous enough to exploit, especially with Martinelli, Ødegaard and Saka in that front four. So yeah, what I think Tottenham are better off doing, or what I would try and do anyway, is I'll try and kind of do what Aston Villa did at the Emirates, where you bait Arsenal, not into a false sense of security, but if you sort of like ride out the storm perhaps in the first half, take it to 0-0 at half time, that's kind of when Arsenal, well, evidently, based on this graph I can show you now, that's when Arsenal kind of got stressed, and when the chances started to be missed and the keeper started saving shots, Arsenal started to doubt themselves in this game against Villa, and that's when Villa turned the heat on and exploited that space. So that's what I'd do if I was Tottenham. I'd put the onus on Arsenal to win the game, let them have the ball, let them come on to Spurs. And of course, we've seen there on those shots face graph, Spurs don't face many shots, are a defensively adept side when they want to be. Invite Arsenal on and then pick them off later on in the game with your runners. But if that's not how the game pans out, then they still do have James Maddison, who could be the key. Anyway, guys, yes, it's the interview part of the video now. And like I just said then, we've got Sonny Talks Spurs on the show today, of course, a Spurs fan, with an amazing name as well. Imagine being a Spurs fan and also being called Sonny. Yeah, talk about lucky. But anyway, he's a great guy. I will link his channel in the description, and I'll probably put his channel up here in the edit at some point now so you can see it. Go check that out if you want loads of Tottenham content that's probably a bit more in-depth and knowledgeable than this as a stupid Man City fan. But nonetheless, Sonny, take it away.
Oh, I just think, from my point of view, Postecoglou has been a breath of fresh air. Gone are the days, you say the names there, Conte, Mourinho, and the fact that you said Nuno makes me chuckle. Like, that just feels like a bygone era for Spurs. But don't get me wrong, we had our moments under those managers. People will say, were they given as much backing as Postecoglou? But bringing it down to, you know, what it was all about, it was just not good football, and it didn't achieve what it was set out to achieve. You know, we were there to win now with those managers, with the resources we had, and it just didn't work out. And that could be for a number of reasons. Could be for, you know, Daniel Levy and just the players we had at the time. But, you know, when you've got Harry Kane at your disposal, which those managers did, unlike Postecoglou, you hope to achieve something. You know, Harry Kane scored 30 goals for Conte's team last year, and we still finished 8th. And there was many issues because of that. But going back to Postecoglou, I just think he is what we've been wanting since Pochettino left. Like, Pochettino had to go because, you know, that relationship was a bit fractured and maybe his tactics had been sort of found out. But with Postecoglou, I think I speak for many Spurs fans, and, you know, a lot of Australian Celtic fans have been in my comment section on my channel, and he's just such a good, like, he's like a statesman. The way he talks, the way he handles the media, his tactics are revolutionary for this Tottenham side. Don't get me wrong, there's been a few bumps in the road, but this is his first season. You compare it to other managers at their same time, you think Klopp, you think Arteta, they finished 8th in their first seasons. You know, bearing in mind Arsenal did win an FA Cup. I think Liverpool got to a Europa League final that year and the Carabao Cup final. So if you take that all into consideration, I know that's better, but Postecoglou we're still punching above our weight. You know, this is a new tactic, a new system. And even Pep Guardiola finished 3rd with that Manchester City team in his first season.
This is going to lead me to my next question. Like, you've actually just said what I was going to say. So it's alluding towards the way Postecoglou plays. Now, Postecoglou is very set in his ways, and I think his football's attractive. It's easy on the eye. Now, in my opinion, I don't want to sound ignorant, because I remember people slagging Pep off. So City got beat 4-0 in Pep's first season at Everton. And basically everyone was saying this way of football's not going to work, basically. They were saying that, you know, you can't play pretty football and win in this league, and it was all very sort of cliched and quite a dull argument. But there was one game where I kind of questioned Postecoglou this season on his lack of, like, maybe pragmatism, and it was when he played Chelsea at home and had 9 men. Now, if you refer to Liverpool had 9 men at Tottenham's ground and nearly came away with a point because Klopp adapted the way that his team were playing, and he parked the bus because that was his only option and was going long to Salah. Postecoglou absolutely refuted that, didn't do that, and he had all of his defence on the halfway line. And maybe you can call me ignorant if you want. Like, I really question it. I thought it was like a bit suicidal borderline. I think he was just asking to be beat 5-6, whatever it was, 4-1. So yeah, what do you? I'm not saying you think Postecoglou's stubborn, but do you think maybe there should have been times in the season where he maybe could have been a bit more adaptable? And this will lead me into my next question. But yeah,
I just think the thing is, it's easy to say, and I've seen pundits say like, "What is his plan B?" Just sit back, against, a game that comes to mind is Everton, where we were leading 2-1, looked all hunky-dory, and then Everton were going for it, and you thought, just take it to the corner flag, but no, we kept going, gave away a silly free kick, and it ends 2-2 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 with a header. But when I think about that, and you reference that Chelsea game there, we still had our chances with 9 men.
Yeah.
Like, there was a moment where some went through, and he could have made it 2-2, and
Dyer scored, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he? And it was offside.
Yeah, like there was moments to make it happen, and it's just, do you know what it is? It's going to sound really weird, but after watching, as I said, those other managers and how boring it was, this season, I've been excited by the football I'm watching, and also I've not really been wound up or annoyed, or last season there was moments where I'm just pulling my hair out, heads in my hands, but there's just still a process to go at Tottenham, in the sense of, this new goalkeeper's come in. He's been a breath of fresh air and he's playing better football with us. We've got a new centre-back who looks like such a Rolls Royce apart from the Newcastle game. But they've still got so much to do. There's still tweaks that need to happen in this team. Hence why we've been beaten like 4-0 by Newcastle and, 3-0 away to Fulham as well. There's still moments where you're like, right, we got ahead of ourselves at the beginning of the season as Tottenham fans, thinking like, we were top of the league, we're undefeated. But, we've fallen back down to earth more harder than ever before. But I feel like when it comes to his tactics, I think it's all there. It's all there. Like, you can see the way the wing backs sort of invert, the way we use Mickey van der Ven. It's just, there are moments where, people go, Tottenham's defence. Tottenham's defence is the issue. It's not the defence, it's the midfield. The midfield needs sorting. Basuma's fallen off a little bit. We need a stronger player in his position. The other centre mid needs to sort of be more, defined what his role is, because it started off with 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗏, then it's been Bentancur, and both of them one wants to be more defensive box to box, the other wants to be up in the final third. Maddison's form has dipped. At the beginning of the season, he was like sublime. The front three have not been pressing as much. So there are moments where we need to, if we're playing like the whole season like we did at the beginning of the year, then these conversations wouldn't be happening and people wouldn't be questioning his tactics. Whereas these minor tweaks just need to be ironed out, and it takes a couple of years, as you said, with Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola is a genius. I think he's the best manager of all time, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Postecoglou is that. I think Postecoglou has had this thing his whole career, what I've discovered, where it was either for the Australian national team, the Australian teams he managed, Yokohama F. Marinos in Japan, even up to Celtic, where everywhere along the line he got questioned. And I think that sort of has built his armour up, and sort of he likes to prove people wrong and show that this is the way we're going to play. And the thing that I like as well, and it sort of relates back to the first question, is that he is the one who fronts it up. These are my tactics, not Conte just chucking players under the bus.
Yeah, he takes a lot of accountability, doesn't he?
And I rate that in a manager, because at the end of the day, it is sort of his plan that they're executing. And if it does go a bit Pete Tong, then, at the end of the day, a lot of us do blame players, some people blame managers, but it seems to be a good relationship at Tottenham developing. But even like people say, Basuma's, has he fallen off? But he did a recent interview with Sky Sports, and he was still everyone is singing the praises of Postecoglou. And I think the Tottenham fan base are as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Arsenal game as well, obviously, that we're going into now, Spurs have got a lot to play for, still in the Champions League hunt. It's still alive, it's still there. You don't know if Villa will slip up. So there's impetus for Spurs to win this game always, but added one because of the table. Now, Aston Villa were the last team to play Arsenal. Of course, well, just for a note for the audience, we're recording this before tonight when Arsenal play Chelsea. So it was Aston Villa a couple of weeks ago, the last loss was. Anyway, the goal that Aston Villa scored, the second one, was Ollie Watkins running in behind. And I said in a video where I said how Aston Villa could win that game that they would exploit Zinchenko's side, and they did that with aplomb. Now, you'd imagine Zinchenko wouldn't play. However, Spurs, much like Aston Villa, I think, probably the most similar side in the league in terms of having a lot of runners in behind. So you got Brennan Johnson, Timo Werner, and obviously Sonny. So is that the way that Tottenham are going to hurt Arsenal in this game, do you feel? Where do you think Arsenal's weak spot is? Because I always think it's that. It's very hard to find a weak spot in Arsenal at the moment, but I think the runners in behind, a way you can get at them, but perhaps the way with Arsenal playing away from home, they might shape up differently, maybe play a bit deeper. How do you think the game's going to pan out in an attacking sense for Spurs?
I could see them sort of defensively playing a bit like they did at Manchester City, where they did sort of sit back and absorb. And you know that Gabriel and Saliba can front that up. I mean, against Bayern, I mean, I've not seen a performance from them like that in a while. In the first leg, where they looked a bit at, sixes and sevens. Same with Ben White. There was moments where he looked a bit defensively suspect. But yeah, you think that left-hand side, whether it is 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 or Zinchenko, I mean, you just know that. And after seeing him play, I think Arsenal played against Blackburn's youth team the other day, and Jurriën Timber came back and he scored a goal. He looked sublime.
Not he played for him, honestly.
That's the thing. He's going to be like a new signing, but that's the moment when he gets back in the team and his versatility, he can play in midfield as well. Like, that's the player who will shore up their defence even more, which is worrying for the league. But yeah, I see them setting up like that, but they know in the transition they can get us. When it'll probably take one or two balls for Rice to pass it out, and they'll have their runners against us as well. So I think, there's been a few moments in the last couple of games where Son has played through the middle. You've had Werner and Brennan Johnson on the wings, but they've been against the likes of, say, West Ham, where I didn't think we needed runners in a game like West Ham, where they were going to sit back. And you think, they weren't like this against Palace, but they're going to be that low block, and we're trying to cross it in, and they're just heading the ball away, Zuma and whoever plays alongside him, 𝗦𝗶𝗴Ｈis or whoever. But Son struggles with that. Son really struggles with back to goal aerial ability. Whereas I think in this game he might get a bit more like space. I think this Arsenal team are, even though they're defensively sound, they're not like low block, but they could be. That's the thing with these tactics. They could turn up and do what they did against your team, Manchester City. So there is all that like will they, won't they moments. But I think with the likes of Brennan Johnson causing some pace, he'll be on that right hand side against whoever they play at the left back. Then on the other side, maybe a Timo Werner to unlock a few doors. And that's sort of the tactics we did use against them in the reverse fixture. And no one fancied us in that game either. And we sort of pressed them into oblivion for that second goal, and, crept in the back door with the first goal, a good bit of skill from Maddison against Saka. So it's also one of those, I mean, I know you're doing a video on the tactics of it, but it's one of those games where tactics sort of go out the window because it is the derby. Like, the atmosphere will take over, won't it? Yeah,
well, I guess, Sonny, final question is always score prediction. You said how you think it's going to pan out or how it could, but what score do you think it's going to be? Put your money where your mouth is.
Should I do head or heart? I don't even know. head. I don't know. I feel like
since you're a fan, go with heart. Go with heart.
I'll go with my heart, which just always overrules. And I can be an optimistic Spurs fan sometimes when these games roll around. And I went to the game last year, and we played better than that, because that game was frustrating. We lost 2-0. We went 2-0 down in the first half, and in the second half, it was a typical Conte game of moments that just didn't happen, and you leave thinking like we could have, but then you're like, well, it just wasn't good. Not your day at the office sort of thing. So I think Tottenham might upset the apple cart here and throw open the title race. Hopefully, help us get into the top 4 off the back of this. Which even if we finish 5th, I think that is a good season. The Europa League is going to be different next year with the way that the competition is changing. But I'm going to go with a 2-1 win in the North London derby for the mighty Tottenham Hotspur.
I am on my knees for that to be true. That would be absolutely delightful. Well, Sonny, thank you very much for joining us, mate. Pleasure. Cheers, pal.
Thank you very much, Sonny. Yes, North London derby. Look, like I said at the start of the video, my head will go out the window if Arsenal win this game. This is really the one that they could lose in the run-in, and hopefully they do. Don't forget to subscribe though, guys. I've been Adam Monk. Have a lovely weekend, whatever you are doing, and enjoy the football, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.